Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to hear about your company, Mockingbird. You're doing a lot of cool things in the healthcare industry. And I saw the other day, one of your hashtags, end clinician burnout, which I think is really cool. And especially relevant now too with COVID-19. So why don't you start by just telling us about yourself, maybe what you studied, where you went to college, where you've worked in the past, what you're doing now, and kind of what led you to this role.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Starting at the beginning, born and raised on a wheat farm in Wyoming, somehow, some way got interested in service and the service academies. There's no real, service background in my family, but I went to a summer camp at the Air Force Academy, fell in love with the concept of the academy. So Air Force was the only academy I didn't get into then. So it was a West Point kind of Annapolis decision, and of course chose Annapolis. So I'm a 1995 graduate, Naval Academy. I chose nuclear power submarines as my service selection. So ended up doing 8 years as a submariner. The 6th and 7th year, I was assigned to teach ROTC at Boston University. And that was really the start of the transition out of the military, because I was able to take advantage of an MBA program that Boston University offered. So during that window as well, I have to mention I married my wife of 20 years today while I was in Boston. So a big day for us. And finished my service and graduated from BU all in 2003 at the same time, and kind of jumped into my business life. So I was a consultant for 4 years up in Boston, had my first daughter at that time, kind of grew a little bit weary of the travel lifestyle of a consultant. And ultimately, my wife, Mary, who I married, is a native Rhode Islander. So we had our eye on Rhode Island as well. So we migrated south of Boston in 2006, late 2006, settled into the house I still live in today. And I kind of went from consulting into banking. So I joined Citizens Bank, owned by RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland at the time. And I spent 10 years not as a lender, kind of banker per se, but more as an operator. I ran their procurement department and then ultimately looked after some big operations groups within the bank. Had my second daughter kind of early on in that time as well. And then it's interesting, I'd say, 9 or 10 years into that stint, I just started to not feel the engagement that I was seeking. I wasn't really being challenged. A highly regulated, banking industry. And I kind of the entrepreneurial bug came calling. I jumped into family entertainment kind of franchise concept opportunity out of banking. It couldn't have been a more different experience, and spent a couple of years helping to grow a family entertainment concept. And enough where I got great experience, but enough to know that wasn't long-term it for me as well. And lastly, I would say my wife's a nurse practitioner, and I've always kind of had my eye on healthcare, and particularly some of the challenges that she would frustratingly bring home around how mismanaged kind of some of the HR systems are, how poor the technology is, how much administration and paper there still was. And so I had the great fortune a little over 2 years ago to cross paths with a couple of founders of Mockingbird who had a great idea and almost a minimum viable product, and were really looking for someone outside of healthcare to come in and build a team and take us to market. And so I've had the great pleasure to do that over the last couple of years.
That's really awesome. And congratulations on your anniversary. That's really exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
It's so great to hear how your wife, obviously in like her work as a nurse practitioner kind of influenced how you approach Mockingbird. That's really cool to hear. And talking about being an entrepreneur, it's really cool to hear about your transition kind of from the military to the entrepreneur, how you made that transition and your MBA and consulting. And it's really great to hear about that journey. What are some of the skills and qualities you think that an entrepreneur should have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I won't lie, I'm 48 already. And I didn't kind of realize that the entrepreneurial spirit within me was ready to come out till probably 5 or 6 years ago. Again, it was, in the military, particularly in submarines and nuclear power, there's one way to do it. And you cannot deviate from the one way to do it, or you know, put the nuclear reactor at risk. And there's good reason why there's only one way to do it. But for me, it was one of the initial signs that this isn't long term for me. The creativity, the leadership difference in skills in, again, nuclear power submarines, for me, I didn't see it. It wasn't appealing to me. So I was like, you know, let me step out of the military, very command and control and structured, particularly in submarines, and let me try my hand at, you know, business, whatever this business world is. And so I didn't think much about it. As a consultant, I did a whole bunch of different things, but it was so fast paced and so new. I was just kind of, you know, in it and doing everything I could just to keep up and make a good name for myself. And then, you know, and then moved kind of into banking, settled down, established a family. And again, had the good fortune to work my way up within the bank, but just started, you know, I guess the second half of those 10 years to say, and what else is out there? And I want to be intellectually stimulated. I want to bring my creativity to bear. And I candidly don't have creativity. I've been structured too much and trained that way. And I sometimes say structure is the enemy of creativity. I'm kind of pushing myself and some of the people I mentor and have the privilege to be around to push them in that regard. So for me, I think the transition now, I could not be happier day to day, you know, engaged with what I'm doing. And I think there's kind of two pieces to it. Number one is you have to have an extreme passion for what you're doing. You have to believe in it. And for me, it's, you know, we are solving a pain point in healthcare that's ultimately going to positively impact, you know, 10 million plus clinicians in the US, including my wife. And that's what I need. That's what I want to believe in. I'm passionate about it. And I will not fail. Like, we will get there. I know it's not the exact way we've mapped out, but we will succeed. And that's that passion for me. I wake up every day and can't wait to kind of take the next step forward. So I think passion is one, but then it's balanced with perseverance. So for me, it's passion and perseverance are what really are the traits of an entrepreneur. And perseverance, there's a little bit of categorization, but, you know, risk taking, you have to, it doesn't necessarily align up perseverance, but, you know, whether it's financially, whether it's, I like to have a plan, but I know this plan I've developed will be wrong, just inevitably. And there's risk associated with that. You have to have a risk appetite and be willing to take risk. And I kind of wish someone would have coached me or told me that a little bit before, but fine, I figured it out. And so I think it's risk taking and then just balanced with patience. Perseverance and patience are related, but patience is sometimes, you know, not taking action is an action in and of itself. And I have to let healthcare understand Mockingbird. I have to let our brand, you know, live and grow. And calling someone and trying to sell every single day doesn't work. You've got to give them time. And so I think it's having passion and having perseverance and balancing kind of risk taking and patience within that perseverance skill set. To me, those are what I think are invaluable traits and what I continue to try to work on myself to be successful.
That's really awesome and so helpful too. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And it's probably, really encouraging also to hear that it sometimes just takes patience when starting something new, like anything.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about Mockingbird and maybe the name of the business and what it does exactly.
Yeah, thank you. So the name's interesting. So, you know, we didn't misspell Mockingbird. We left the K out. So there's what's known as maintenance of certification, MOC in healthcare. And it's not a good word. It's kind of a bad word. It's the burdensome tasks I have to do year over year as a clinician, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, to maintain my board certification or my specialty. So you might, you know, an example, you might be a pediatrician. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. You have to do things every quarter, every year to maintain your pediatric specialty. And I have to do different things every year to maintain my orthopedic surgery, certification or specialty. So that it's interesting that, you know, the founders, and this predates me, were like, we want to work MOC into the name somehow. And one of our founders was talking to the other founder sitting in his car. And literally a baby bird dropped out of a nest and fell on the hood of his car. And it's a good story. The baby bird lived and everything. But in that moment, he says, I just came up with the name. It's Mockingbird. And it stuck. And so it's somewhat of a random occurrence, but I'd say 9 out of 10 people love the name and 1 out of 10 hates it, but we'll take that. And so what Mockingbird does, I described it a little bit, but I think there's even a bigger pain point right now for clinicians, which is not only do I have to maintain that board certification or specialty, but I have to get a state license to practice in any state and maintain that state license as well. And now with the pandemic has really accelerated telemedicine. So I can now, I don't have to see you face to face. We can do this, and I can see patients in all 50 states if I want to. Well, in order to see patients in all 50 states, you have to be licensed in the state where that patient is or resides. And only in the United States have we taken 50 states and made the requirements in every state very different. So different deadlines, different requirements. And so the burden on a healthcare clinician to understand what they have to do for board certification, and then particularly for state license or multiple state license, relies solely on them. They're going to Department of Health websites. The organized ones have built spreadsheets or pieces of paper. The disorganized ones, or the busy ones, I won't say disorganized, have hired people to do this for them. And my founders were like, there's got to be a better way. And they were, having this pain point very real in their practices. So their vision 3 or 4 years ago was, let's build a platform that automates that and solves for it. So that's what Mockingbird is we've automated all of those state licensing rule sets for nurse practitioner, physician assistant, osteopathic doctor, and medical doctor. We'll go to social worker and therapists and dentists and others soon, but automated all the state rules, automated all the board certification. And then lastly, the way you maintain those license and certification is through continuous medical education, or CME. We all do some sort of continuous education in our professional career, but it's really intense for healthcare clinicians in particular. So we are feeding or aligning CME content to those ongoing requirements so that the doctors and clinicians don't have to go find it. They can simply see what opportunities to learn exist on Mockingbird that will meet those requirements. And so that's the whole value proposition for the platform. There's no platform out there like it today. It's been a lot of work in terms of years and millions of dollars in investor funding to build it, but we've gotten there, and there's a tremendous amount of interest in our product today.
That's awesome. And that's such a good point about the state licensing, and particularly with COVID and like online doctor appointments. I never would have thought of that. It's so incredible. And I'm sure so helpful just to be able to have it all in one place. Because licensing state by state is just horrendous sometimes. So no, that's so cool.
It is.
And what are some of your company goals for the next 3 to 5 years?
We're getting a very positive reaction again from both individual clinicians who are saying, "Oh my God, this is a game changer," but organizations, hospitals, healthcare systems. The clinician often looks to their organization for guidance on how to manage, all of these licenses and certifications, and so we're not selling direct to clinicians. We're actually selling to their employer. Again, because that's typically the way this is handled, and I think the right way. But in addition, we have part of our product is a dashboard for the hospital or the enterprise to look across their clinical staff, see who's compliant, who's potentially non-compliant, and kind of take action accordingly, because the organization ultimately owns that compliance risk of making sure all their clinicians are compliant and maintaining these licenses. So we're selling B2B or to enterprise, and I'm building up to answer your question. What enterprise in healthcare are used to, unfortunately, a little bit for us, is very kind of inefficient technology implementation or solutions that are not provider friendly and are still heavily based in paper documentation. And I'd say, our challenge is really change management. everyone knows it's broken, but it's broken and it's broken and it still somehow works. So we come in with, let us help you and let us automate this for you. Well, I immediately distrust you because you're a third party, you're a technology vendor. I'm used to very poor implementations. I'm used to poor usability of the system. And we simply say, just let's do a demo. Like, let's let you see the product. I'll stop talking. And most that look at it then say, wow, this is different. I have seen nothing like this, and we need this. So the goal for the next 3 to 5 years is it's really to continue to methodically change these enterprises and these organizations, open their eyes that there is a solution out there that automates this. It's a simple implementation. It's all things considered very cheap, and it has a massive impact. And so I think, related to that, our brand awareness continues to grow. We're getting great press from some of the organizations that are using us, some of the kind of healthcare ecosystems we've joined, like Startup Health and Global Health Impact Network and Fund. And so my goal over the next 3 to 5 years is to continue to grow the brand and product that is Mockingbird, to continue to get users on the platform. Our goal by the end of this year is 10,000 users, and we've got a very realistic path to get there. And then next 3 to 5 years, I'd love to add another couple zeros to that. But ultimately, like, we win when healthcare clinicians start to say, wow, this has changed my life. This has given me time back. This has made education actually impactful rather than a tick the box exercise that it is today. Like, that's the ultimate, what makes me proud and my team proud, is when we really start to impact healthcare, for the long term. And so there's a little bit of a leap, or I guess a task ahead of us to get out there, get the users, get the brand out there. But we are, again, that passion thing. We are driven and won't stop ultimately until healthcare clinicians say, this has changed my life for the better.
That's awesome. I think that's really exciting. It's really fascinating to hear about the B2B sales and how that works, and then how that goes on to have a huge impact on some of the clinicians working for these employers. I think that's really cool. Keeping in the theme of goals, how has Localvest helped you achieve some of your goals so far?
In 2 ways, I would say. And there's this broad thing that's happening, and this thing is Service Academy and veteran leaders are communicating and getting together and understanding we've got a lot of shared interests and learnings. And so I give, Bill Militello and Scott Mackus and the group great credit for having the vision to see that and starting to develop forums and platforms like Localvest that service this growing, very hungry and passionate group of leaders that want to do good and want to work together. So I think very tactically, I would say, is Localvest, I put our opportunity on the platform a bit ago. I'd say about a year ago, my initial kind of fundraising opportunity came on. We raised about 150,000 off the platform that, again, I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so that's a lot of money, and that's a very tangible outcome for being on the platform. And that was a little bit even early days of the platform, and I've seen the platform continue to develop. So raising money, number one, has been a huge benefit. But number two, I have one of the investors that came from the platform now is also a formal advisor for Mockingbird. And so, and by the way, I have, if not every week, it's every other week, I have a connection that, again, comes from the platform or this Service Academy kind of network and veteran network that's building, of just people that want to share their story with me, hear my story, again, collaborate on how we can learn from each other and together rather than the hard way. So I think the fundraising side of Localvest is there and tangible for us, but it's also that non-compensation or financial piece to it, which is the growing network of both issuers and investors that are on Localvest have benefited me. And again, I'm trying to be one of those as well, not just raise money, but look at other deals and see how I can help some of these other causes that I believe are great.
That is really cool. And talking about raising capital with Localvest, what is the experience like using the platform, and how easy is it to connect with potential investors?
there's a little bit of just getting your deal set up. You have to have your documents together, which we all have anyhow. Fill out the profiles for your team and kind of either have your private placement memorandum or your convertible note or whatever the documents are that get an investor comfortable. So it's a fairly straightforward process to kind of build your deal on Localvest. But then following that, the way it's presented very professionally along with other deals, the amount of information that I get as the issuer, who's looked at my deal, how many times they've looked at it, who's downloaded my documents, helps me then follow up with the investors or potential interested folks. So I kind of go on at least once a week and see who's looking at my deal, and I follow up with them offline and to see if there's any other questions I can ask or can answer for them. And so I found it to be a very, again, easy onboarding process, a very data-driven, valuable, ongoing experience. And it's a little bit, though, it's what you make of it. I can't just sit back and let it happen, even though sometimes it does. I think you've got to own your deal and take advantage of the continued features and functionality that they're implementing into the platform. And I've seen it improve significantly since the first time I was on. So I'm a huge fan. We're in a $1 million round right now. I've got almost 700,000 of it committed, but I'll probably go with a final notice here after Labor Day for the final 300,000 and have some of my Localvest investors help me kind of close the round. So I'm excited to get back on the platform with that.
That's great. That's really exciting. It's great to hear too that it's been a community for you, and you found an advisor for Mockingbird through that. That's awesome.
We did.
And for folks who are maybe looking at Localvest, thinking about raising capital, what advice do you have for them, and what are some of your best practices?
There's kind of a baseline set of documents that, whether it's Localvest or just reaching out, individually, or any platform that you're going to need. And I think as someone who's ready to go raise money, make sure you have what the deal is, your research of the market, your research of the competitors, a good summary of your team. Take the time to create the documents, because then once those are established, you're sending those in a lot of different places, and it's helping answer questions. So I would say kind of get everything together to represent your deal the best way that then Localvest allows you to. So again, onboarding was simple. Having the documents, I could just fill out all of the required fields to get my deal up and running. And then I was super impressed again with how the deal is displayed and how the community on Localvest continues to grow. But I would say once your deal's up, work it every day initially. See, again, look at the reports, who's looking at your deals, follow up with them on the platform, offline. You'll kind of find your right cadence and rhythm. And inevitably, kind of once a month, something has changed. You've raised some more money. The page in the pitch deck that used to say this is now updated with that. Go in and update the deal. So spend the right amount of time continuously to represent your deal the right way. And investors some of them will look at it and they want to see continued growth in your company, and they may watch for 30 or 60 days and see that you're raising some money, and then suddenly, wow, they're getting dollars in. I get a fear of missing out, and I join as well. So I think, the second thing is work your deal, stay focused on your deal, update your deal, and don't expect all the money to come through on the first day or the first week. Some investors like to sit back and watch what others do and then join a little bit later.
Awesome, Brad. That's super helpful. I think a lot of people will appreciate that advice. And yeah, it sounds really dynamic and exciting. And Mockingbird is growing, and we're just really excited to see how it continues to grow. We're excited to see what you guys do. Thank you so much for talking with us today. We really appreciate it. You're our first interview, so thank you.
My pleasure. Happy to. Thanks for the opportunity.
We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.